She looked at me, lifted her wine glass, and said, "You've never belonged at this table." The guests chuckled awkwardly. My husband stared at his plate. And I just smiled. Because what she didn't know was that the table she was talking about was mine. Not just the table. The house. The chandelier above us. Even the wine in her hand. All of it. I paid for. Let me take you back to that night. It was supposed to be a family celebration. Elaine, my mother-in-law, had organized a fancy dinner at what she still thought was her home in Scottsdale, Arizona. But 3 months earlier, my husband Brandon had quietly signed the house over to me. Not out of ego, but because he saw what it was doing to me. For tax reasons. And because we were buying out a portion of the family trust. He transferred the title fully into my name. Elaine didn't know. She still thought the house was part of her legacy. The tension. The cruelty. The exhaustion. He said, "You deserve to feel safe in your own home. Let's make that official." Elaine didn't know the papers had changed. She still thought I was a guest in her world. And I let her believe that. The dinner was to celebrate Grace, my sister-in-law, who had just landed a creative director role in New York. I had paid for her training program. But Elaine took the credit. As if it were her doing all along. When we arrived, Elaine threw her arms around Brandon. "Natalie," she said flatly. "No hug. No eye contact. That's just how it always was." We sat at the long dining table. 12 seats. Each one chosen carefully. I was directly across from Elaine. Of course. She loved having the front seat to my discomfort. The first comment came when the salad was served. "I still think women are at their best when they slow down and focus on family," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. It was from our collection. A bottle I had handpicked. Brandon shifted in his seat. But, like always, he said nothing. Then came the next jab. "It's cute that you have your little agency, Natalie. But real success comes from education." Another guest cleared their throat. I didn't blink. She'd said worse before. What she didn't know was that everything around her, the plates, the silver, the art on the walls, had been bought with money I earned. From the very business she mocked. When dessert arrived, Elaine leaned across the table. She looked at me, smug, drunk, and satisfied, and said, "I guess some girls just marry up." That was her favorite line. I'd heard it before. This time, I stood up. Slowly. Without raising my voice. I folded my napkin. Placed it beside my untouched dessert. And smiled. "Elaine," I said gently. "Thank you for dinner. Next time, if you'd prefer to host it in your own home, just let me know." Her face froze. Brandon's fork hit his plate, not in shock, but in realization. Someone gasped. But I didn't stay to watch. I walked out. Heels clicking across the floor I owned. They say revenge is best served cold. But that night? It was served warm. With red wine, creme brulee. And silence. Because sometimes, you don't need to win the argument. You just need to own the table. And believe me, I didn't always have one to sit at. I didn't always have a table. In fact, for most of my childhood, I didn't even have a real kitchen. I grew up in Bakersfield, California. In a trailer with thin walls, a leaky roof, and a front door that creaked every time the desert wind blew through. My mom worked night shifts at a nursing home. My dad fixed trucks when he wasn't too drunk to stand. We never had much. But I had a mind that noticed things. Patterns, people. And the stories they didn't say out loud. At 16, I started babysitting. Not because I liked kids, but because I needed money for school supplies. And one night, while waiting for a family to come home, I saw a Facebook ad that changed everything. Learn social media marketing, free workshop, no experience needed. I didn't even have Wi-Fi at home. But the public library did. For the next 6 months, I spent every Saturday in the back corner of that library, watching videos with borrowed headphones, taking notes in a second-hand notebook, and dreaming of something that didn't involve punching a time card or getting talked down to by someone in a suit. At 18, I had no college acceptance letters, no scholarships, and no real plan. But I had one client, a local taco truck owner who needed help with Instagram. I offered to work for free, just for a chance to test what I'd learned. 3 weeks later, his weekend sales doubled. He handed me $200 in cash and said, "You've got something. Keep going." It was the first time anyone had said that to me. While everyone else my age was taking selfies at dorms, I was working 2 jobs by day and building websites at night on a refurbished Dell that wheezed when I opened Chrome. It was lonely and ugly and sometimes humiliating. I had clients cancel without notice. I had bills I couldn't cover. I once cried in a gas station bathroom because I couldn't afford tampons and gas in the same week. But I kept going. Because I knew there was something more waiting for me than the life I was born into. At 21, I launched StoryGrid Media from my bedroom. The name came from an old sticky note I'd written. Great marketing equals great stories plus structure. I pitched my services to hair salons, plumbers, dog groomers. Anyone who would give me 10 minutes. Most said no. But one boutique gym said yes. They were struggling to compete with big chains. I told their story online, real members, real transformations. None of that polished fitness nonsense. It worked. Membership jumped 40% in 2 months. They signed a year-long contract. And just like that, I wasn't guessing anymore. I was building something real. That success didn't change everything overnight. But it changed me. I wasn't just the trailer park girl with a borrowed laptop. I was a founder. A problem solver. A woman with invoices, results, and receipts. But success has a way of drawing out people who want to put you back in your place. And I was about to meet one of them. In the form of a man I didn't know yet would become my biggest supporter. And my mother-in-law's favorite enemy. His name was Brandon Whitmore. And our worlds were about to collide. I met Brandon at a co-working space in downtown Austin. He was giving a talk on sustainable housing startups. Clean-cut, charismatic. Way too polished for the chipped IKEA desk I was working from. He noticed me scribbling notes in the back row. Afterward, he walked up and said, "You asked the smartest questions in the room." I laughed. Because I didn't ask anything out loud. He held up a sticky note I dropped. StoryGrid. You're building this? That's how it started. Brandon was everything I wasn't. Raised in private schools. Weekends at ski resorts. Internships at firms I couldn't even pronounce. But he didn't act like it. He listened. He asked questions. And he never once made me feel like I didn't belong. For 6 months, we shared cheap lunches. Worked side by side. And fell hard. Somewhere between coffee-fueled brainstorms and rainy walks home. He never cared that I hadn't gone to college. Never flinched when I told him I'd grown up in a trailer. If anything, he seemed to admire it. "You built this from nothing," he'd say. "That's more impressive than any degree." The first time I met his family, I wore my best blazer and second best shoes. We pulled up to a sprawling estate in Westlake Hills. where a valet took our keys. And a woman with sharp eyes opened the door. Elaine Whitmore. Brandon's mother. She looked me over like she was scanning a barcode. Then smiled. "So, you're the marketing girl," she said. "Not girlfriend. Not Natalie. Just the marketing girl." Dinner was formal. 3 courses. 4 forks. More wine than words. Brandon tried to bridge the silence. Elaine stayed icy. Henry, his father, was polite, quiet, unreadable. When she finally spoke to me directly, it was to ask, "What university did you attend?" I told her the truth. I didn't. I started my business instead. She blinked slowly. How unconventional. I thought maybe I was imagining the chill. Maybe she was just guarded. But when Brandon left to take a call, Elaine leaned across the table and said quietly, "Some people come from the kind of background that forces them to hustle. I understand. Just don't mistake survival for success." I felt like I'd been slapped. With words so polished. They cut like glass. I didn't respond. Just swallowed my pride. And let the silence do the talking. Brandon never knew what she said that night. I didn't tell him. I didn't want to start a war with a woman I thought I could eventually win over. But the truth? Elaine wasn't waiting to be impressed. She was waiting for me to disappear. The deeper Brandon and I fell in love, the colder she became. He proposed on our 3rd anniversary. With a ring that sparkled like the skyline we built our dreams under. I said yes before he finished asking. But while I was planning our future, Elaine was plotting how to remind me that in her world, I would always be less. And I was about to learn just how far she'd go. To prove it. The first year of our marriage was beautiful. And brutal. We lived in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner. The walls smelled faintly of starch. The floor creaked in every corner. And I turned the closet into my office. StoryGrid had a few clients. A trickle of income. And endless ambition. But ambition doesn't pay rent. 3 months in, I lost my biggest client. They went with a bigger agency. Someone more experienced. Then my laptop died, taking half my files with it. I cried in the bathroom for an hour. And Brandon made grilled cheese, while pretending not to hear. "Maybe this is a sign," I told him. "Maybe I should just get a regular job." He looked at me like I'd said something obscene. "You're building something," he said. "Setbacks aren't signs. They're just storms. You push through." I believed him. Mostly. But the voices in my head sounded an awful lot like Elaine. She invited us over for Christmas dinner that year. Her version of festive included crystal, judgment, and subtle digs wrapped in gold-rimmed sarcasm. Halfway through dessert, she leaned in and asked sweetly, "Have you thought about going back to school, Natalie? Even just a community college course. Might help stabilize your situation." Brandon shot her a look. I smiled through gritted teeth. "I'm learning every day," I said. "Just not in a classroom." She nodded, as if I'd confirmed her point. That night, on the drive home, I stared out the window. Brandon apologized again. Said he was tired of defending me to his family. But that was the problem, wasn't it? He defended me after the fact. Never in the moment. He loved me. No question. But love isn't the same as protection. And I was starting to feel like I was in this ring alone. Then, something changed. A friend of mine, a baker with a small shop, asked for help promoting her new cupcake line. I said yes. Not because I believed it would work, but because I needed to believe in something again. I crafted a campaign. That focused not on the cupcakes, but on the memories tied to them. The last recipe my mom wrote before chemo. The frosting I made the day I came out. Grandma's cinnamon, 1 spoon too much, and just right. It went viral. Orders tripled in a week. She had to hire staff. Then 3 other small businesses reached out. All because of those posts. Suddenly, I wasn't scrambling. I was scaling. StoryGrid had a heartbeat again. And this time I wasn't chasing clients. They were chasing me. Brandon was ecstatic. Elaine? Less so. When we visited next, I showed her one of the campaigns. Just a little pride, hoping for an ounce of recognition. She nodded. Well, she said. It's nice they're giving you a chance. Just be careful not to work for exposure. Real businesses pay. They signed a 6-figure contract, I said, gently. She blinked. Let's see if they renew it. That was the moment I snapped. Not with words. Not with anger. But inside, something shifted. I stopped seeking her approval. And I started building my own standard. She could keep her dinner parties, her pearls, her pedigree. I had something she never would. A company with soul. A purpose bigger than power. And slowly, very slowly, the balance of power began to tilt. By year 3, StoryGrid wasn't just alive. It was thriving. I had 7 major clients. A full-time team of 5. And a wait list. My office was no longer a closet, but a bright space with exposed brick and too many plants. We had mugs with our logo. Team lunches. Employee birthdays with cupcakes that weren't from a grocery store. Brandon started bragging about me. To friends. To colleagues. At networking events, he'd say, "This is Natalie, the genius behind half the ads you've saved this year." It wasn't just love anymore. It was pride. Real, glowing pride. And for a while, I thought maybe, just maybe, Elaine would follow. At a family brunch, Henry, Brandon's father, asked thoughtful questions about digital strategy. Grace pulled me aside to ask if I could mentor her. But Elaine? She smiled tightly. Isn't it funny, she said once, how a little hobby can turn into a real career? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because the numbers spoke louder. That quarter, I out-earned Brandon. By double. When I showed him the spreadsheet, he laughed. Holy, Natalie. This is insane. You're not intimidated? I asked, half joking. He pulled me into a hug. I'm impressed. And lucky. And very, very in love. We used our combined income to buy a 4-bedroom house. Not far from Elaine's estate. I refused her financial help. We paid for it ourselves. Good starter house, she said at the housewarming party. Actually, I replied. We plan to stay for a while. It's home. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. What she didn't say out loud started leaking through actions. She planned family events without telling me. Excluded my name from invitations. Corrected my grammar mid-conversation. At Thanksgiving, she made a toast. To strong women, who stay gracious. Even when they don't own the company. Everyone laughed politely. I excused myself to the kitchen. And let the burn settle in silence. Then came the night she lost control. It was supposed to be a celebration. Grace had just landed a job at a top-tier design firm in Manhattan. A position I'd helped her prepare for. Funding her online certificate. Mock interviews. Portfolio reviews. Elaine hosted a formal dinner at her house. The house Brandon had legally signed over to me 3 months earlier. She didn't know. And I hadn't told her. From the moment I walked in, I knew it would be tense. Elaine was already on her second glass of wine, buzzing with performative charm. She greeted me with a 1-second glance. Natalie. You look busy. Not beautiful. Not elegant. Just busy. During appetizers, someone asked Grace how she landed the job. She smiled and said, I owe a lot to Natalie. She helped me believe I could do more. I blushed. It was sincere. Elaine lifted her glass, and with a wide smile, said, Well, she certainly has money to throw around. Though I'm sure your natural talent would have found a way regardless. The room went quiet. Brandon touched my arm. A silent "Are you okay?" I was. Until dessert. Elaine leaned in. Her cheeks flushed. Her smile loose. She looked at me and said, You know, Natalie, it's one thing to make money. It's another to have class. Then, she laughed. Loud. Alone. That was when it happened. Grace looked horrified. Michael, Brandon's brother, muttered, Jesus. Even Henry put his fork down. Then, quietly, Henry stood. He didn't say a word. Just shook his head in disappointment. And left the table. Elaine didn't stop. She kept talking. Some people marry into families like ours. And think money buys status. But refinement isn't sold on Instagram. Brandon stood up. Mom. Enough. She ignored him. I just think it's sad. She built all this. But couldn't even give you a child. And just like that. She lost the room. She lost control. And for the first time in 7 years. I didn't feel outnumbered. I felt seen. Elaine's words echoed in the silence. She built all this, but couldn't even give you a child. Nobody moved. Brandon froze. His face drained of color. Henry stared down at his plate, as if searching for an escape through porcelain. Grace looked like she wanted to disappear. Michael opened his mouth, then closed it again. No one spoke. Not a single soul stood up for me. Not until I did. I placed my fork down, folded my napkin, and stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Elaine narrowed her eyes. As if daring me to say something. To break my composure. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my wine. I just looked her in the eye and said, Thank you for your honesty, Elaine. After 7 years. It's refreshing to finally hear what you really think. Brandon reached for my arm. I stepped away. I'll get an Uber, I told him quietly. You should stay and talk to your mother. No. He said instantly, rising to his feet. I'm coming with you. I shook my head. No, Brandon. This is between you and your family now. I'll see you at home. The room was so silent. You could hear the chandelier hum. I walked out. Back straight. Heels clicking across the floor. The floor she didn't know I owned. Behind me, I heard Elaine hiss. See? She's turning him against us. It was laughable, really. I hadn't said 10 words all night. She did all the damage herself. The Uber ride home was a blur. I don't remember the streetlights. Or the voice on the GPS. Or even the driver's face. All I remember was how it felt. To finally stop trying. To stop performing. To stop hoping she'd see me. Respect me. Like me. I unlocked the front door. Kicked off my shoes. And sat on the floor in my own living room. And I cried. Not because I was hurt. But because I was free. For 7 years. I had twisted myself. Into someone more acceptable. More palatable. More Whitmore friendly. I played the long game. Smiled through the insults. Paid for vacations, tuition, medical bills. All in the name of family harmony. But at some point, keeping the peace starts to cost more than war ever would. Brandon came home after midnight. His tie undone. His shoulders heavy. His eyes red. He found me on the back patio, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, sitting beside me. There's no excuse for how she behaved. I didn't ask if she apologized. I already knew the answer. He looked at me carefully. She said she had too much wine. That she didn't mean it the way it sounded. I laughed, soft and bitter. So no. She didn't apologize. She embarrassed everyone, he continued. Dad's furious. Grace and Michael are ashamed. Then why didn't anyone say anything? I asked quietly. Why was I the only one who stood up? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Because deep down, he knew what I knew. They were shocked she said it out loud. Not shocked she felt it. We sat there for a long time. Neither of us speaking. Just breathing. And then, I said the words that had been living in my throat for years. I think I need some space. Brandon stiffened. You mean like, tonight? Or, I'm going to the house in Santa Barbara, I said. I need time to think. To figure out what I want going forward. His voice cracked. Are you talking about our marriage? I looked at him, and for the first time, he didn't look defensive. He looked ashamed. Then, almost whispering, he said, I've spent my life protecting my mother's feelings. I didn't realize it meant leaving yours exposed. I nodded. Because that was the closest thing to understanding I'd ever heard from him. The next morning, I packed a bag. He didn't stop me. He helped me zip it up. And just before I walked out the door, he wrapped his arms around me and said, I love you. More than anything. Please don't forget that. I love you too, I whispered. But love isn't the problem. Then I left. And for the first time in 7 years, I walked into a life that was fully mine. Santa Barbara felt like another planet. There were no toasts. No judgment. No chandeliers humming over tension. Just crashing waves, soft mornings, and silence that didn't sting. I slept in. Walked barefoot to get coffee. Cooked meals I actually ate hot. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to interrupt me. The first night I stood on the balcony, I whispered out loud. I'm still here. Not a version curated for peacekeeping. Not the woman who stays quiet to protect other people's feelings. Just me. I answered emails when I wanted to. Took meetings when I felt strong enough. My team held down the fort like champions. Turns out, I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I journaled. Read books I never finished. Sat with silence long enough to realize I had spent years making myself smaller. For a woman who couldn't even clap when I succeeded. And strangely, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. On day 9, Grace called. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. She crossed a line. Several lines. And we let her. I didn't say anything right away. Silence said enough. Michael and we're on your side. And Dad? He hasn't looked her in the eye since that night. The next morning, Brandon texted me. No begging. No pressure. Just one quiet line. I'm here. When you're ready to talk. He showed up 2 days later. Looked thinner. Quieter. But calmer. We sat on the deck, watching the ocean breathe. He said, finally. I spent years protecting my mother's feelings. I didn't realize I was leaving yours undefended. I looked at him. Not angry. Not soft. Just, waiting. Then he added. You were never the problem. My silence was.